it was my mom. Well, it was a body in a tank.
Inside a rusted anhydrous ammonia tank, sitting quietly in a barn on a Michigan farm, was a body. Not buried, not burned, not dumped in a river somewhere miles away. Welded shut. The tank had been cut open, a body placed inside, and then sealed again with a welder. The same kind of equipment used every day on that property. Investigators who opened that tank in August 2024 found what they believed had been there for over 3 years. The question that stopped everyone in that field wasn't who. They already had their suspect in custody. The question was, how? How does a person do that to someone they once promised to love? And how does a community go 3 years not knowing the answer was sitting in a barn the whole time? To understand that, we have to go back to April 2021. And a woman who had no idea the life she was quietly trying to rebuild was about to be taken from her entirely. Dee Warner was 52 years old, and by every account from the people who knew her, the kind of woman who held things together. She co-owned a trucking company, a farm operation, and a fertilizer and seed chemical business with her husband, Dale. Not a silent partner. Dee ran the administrative side, handled the books, dealt with employees. She called her kids back quickly. When her grandchildren needed her, she showed up. Her daughter later said in court that Dee was the center of everything. And while that sounds like the kind of thing people say at funerals, her son TJ put it more concretely. When Dee stopped being reachable, everyone noticed immediately. That was the first sign something was wrong.
I've never seen my mom not answer her phone.
On the morning she disappeared, Dee had last been seen at the family home on Munger Road in Franklin Township, Lenawee County, Michigan. The day before, there had been an argument. Dee, Dale, and 1 or 2 of their workers about money and the businesses. By the time her family realized she hadn't returned their calls, hadn't picked up, hadn't made contact with her grandchildren, the feeling wasn't confusion. It was dread. There was no financial activity, no phone pings, no sightings, nothing. When investigators first spoke with Dale Warner, he was calm, nonchalant, according to body cam footage. He told officers it wasn't unusual for Dee to take off sometimes. Later, he'd say she might have gone to Jamaica, that she had substance abuse issues, that she'd simply decided to leave and start a new life somewhere else. Her family didn't believe a word of it.
I called her phone, and it went straight to voicemail.
That was not unusual for your mom to pack her bags and disappear for a day, right?
Right.
Where's Mom?
Dale Warner never gave investigators a clean alibi. What he gave them was something more difficult to work with. A rotating series of explanations, each one slightly different from the last, each one impossible to immediately disprove. He wasn't cooperative in the way innocent people are cooperative. He was cooperative in the way that controlled, calculating people are cooperative, answering questions without actually answering them. Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, saw it from day one. While police conducted their initial interviews and canvassed the area, Greg launched what he would eventually call a 5-year campaign for justice. Billboards went up across Lenawee County. The phrase "Justice for Dee" appeared on signs, social media, and news segments. Greg told reporters he fought every single day. He said there were times it felt like the investigation wasn't moving, like no one was listening, like the answer was obvious to him and invisible to everyone else. But behind the scenes, investigators were building something. The first crack came from the patterns in Dale's story. He claimed Dee had left voluntarily. But Dee's phone went completely dark. No social media, no bank withdrawals, no border crossing records. No one who knew her, not a single friend, employee, or relative, reported contact. For a woman who called her kids back quickly, who showed up for her grandchildren, who ran businesses with real people depending on her daily. The silence wasn't voluntary. It was total. The second crack came from people inside the Warners' own orbit. Trial testimony would later reveal that Dee had, in the weeks before her disappearance, been moving toward divorce. She wanted out of the marriage and, critically, she wanted the businesses separated. Dale had co-built those businesses, but so had Dee. A divorce would mean splitting assets that were worth significant money. Investigators began framing this not as a domestic dispute that escalated, but as a financial motive with a specific trigger. Dee had decided she was leaving, and Dale had decided she wasn't. The third crack came from a former nanny and personal assistant named Madison Wolfe. Wolfe testified at trial about the texture of the Warner marriage, the suspicion, the financial tension, the control. Wolfe also testified that Dee had at one point had an affair, which Dale had discovered. Prosecutors argued that for a man like Dale Warner, one who, according to his own stepson TJ, hurt people for control, not for anger, his wife's infidelity, her plan to divorce him, and her intention to claim half the businesses represented something he could not allow. Then came the digital evidence. Cell phone records were examined by a Michigan State Police analyst. Vehicle data was pulled from GM's systems by a General Motors investigator. The kind of location and ignition data embedded in modern vehicles that drivers rarely think about, but investigators now routinely request. Surveillance footage from around the property and surrounding area was reviewed. The picture that emerged, piece by piece, was of a man whose movements on and around the date of Dee's disappearance didn't match what he'd said. In November 2023, 2.5 years after Dee disappeared, Dale Warner was arrested, charged with open murder and tampering with evidence. It was unusual. Prosecutors moved before they had located Dee's remains. They believed they had enough to prove she was dead, and that Dale was responsible. Dale's defense team called it a case built entirely on theory and circumstance. No one had witnessed the murder, they argued. No body had been found. The prosecution, they said, was asking a jury to convict a man based on inference, but that argument had a shelf life. On August 16, 2024, Michigan State Police found human remains on the Warner property. They were inside a mobile anhydrous ammonia tank, a large metal container used to store and transport agricultural fertilizer. The tank had been modified. Specifically, it had been cut open and then re-welded shut. The welding analysis presented at trial showed this wasn't factory work. Someone had opened that tank, placed something inside, and sealed it back up. Dee's remains were identified through dental records. She had been in that tank for more than 3 years. The barn where the tank sat was on the same property where she had lived, where she had run her businesses, where her husband had told police she'd simply walked out of her life one day. The medical examiner testified at trial that Dee Warner died from strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. She is believed to have been already dead before her body was placed inside the tank. Her daughter, Raquel Bach, described it at sentencing in plain, devastating terms. He brutally beat her, strangled her, and as if that was not enough, he duct-taped her hands and mouth. He wrapped her in a tarp and put her in a tank. Prosecutors told the jury that Dale had used farm machinery to move the body and had welded the tank himself. The same skills, the same equipment, the same property. Hidden in plain sight. On March 10, 2026, after 9 hours of deliberation spread over 2 days, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of tampering with evidence. Dale Warner, described by reporters in the courtroom as wearing a coat and tie, buckled slightly when the verdict was read. His attorney patted his arm as he became emotional. In the gallery, Dee's family cried quietly and held each other. Outside the courthouse, Greg Hardy, the man who had driven that 5-year campaign, Mo who had put up the billboards, who had stood in front of cameras asking for justice when it felt like no one was listening, became emotional and said it had been a long time coming. He described it as no longer justice for Dee, but victory for Dee. He also said something that cut through the moment's relief. He was disappointed the verdict wasn't first-degree murder. Sentencing came on May 7th, 2026. 5 members of Dee's family took the stand. Rickle Bach told the court that the only things Dale ever loved were himself and money, and that he had stalked, manipulated, and preyed on the very person he was supposed to love and protect. T.J. Bach told the judge that Dale had tried to erase his mother and failed, and made a promise. If Dale ever came up for a parole hearing, T.J. would be there to make sure he was not released.
Dale John Warner, you're a narcissistic, psychopathic liar and murderer. Your lack of any remorse for brutally killing my sister is unforgivable and deserves to be punished by the fullest extent of the law.
Dale Warner chose not to speak. His attorney told the court he maintained his innocence and planned to appeal. Judge Michael Olsaver sentenced Dale Warner to 375 months to 60 years in prison for the murder, and a consecutive 17 months to 10 years for evidence tampering, a total of up to 70 years. Parole eligibility comes after approximately 33 years. Before announcing the sentence, Judge Olsaver addressed the courtroom directly. Mr. Warner welded his wife's deceased body into a fertilizer tank, where it remained for more than 3 years. All the while she was sealed in that crude tomb and left in a barn, an act of which Mr. Warner was aware and had the ability to end that suffering at any time, but chose not to. There is a question this case leaves behind that is harder than the verdict. Dale Warner was arrested in November 2023. His wife's remains weren't found until August 2024, 9 months later. Which means that when the family was attending hearings, when defense motions were being filed, when news cameras were setting up outside the courthouse, Dee's body was still on that property. Still in that tank. Still in that barn. The Lenawee County Sheriff's Office initially investigated, then handed the case to the Michigan State Police in August 2022, more than a year after Dee disappeared. The property had been searched, but the tank, it appears, had not been opened. 3 years passed. For Greg Hardy, who drove past that property, who put up billboards visible from the road that ran alongside it, who pushed and pushed and pushed for 5 years. That timeline is not an abstraction. It is personal. The case has since been covered on CBS's 48 Hours and People magazine Investigates, which have both focused on what investigators described as one of the more methodical concealments they had encountered. Not just hiding a body, but doing so with tools, knowledge, and resources most killers don't have access to. Then standing in front of cameras for years and acting like a widower waiting for news. Dee's youngest daughter, a child who was told for years that her mother had simply chosen to leave and start a new life in another country, sat in that courtroom too. The judge read her doctor's letter into the record. He noted that the question of the remaining 29 years of Dee's life was important, but that the more important question was the 29 years that had been taken from her children and grandchildren. Her name was Dee Hardy before she became Dee Warner. Her daughter said at sentencing, "My mom's name, Dee Hardy, will live on forever." That's where we'll leave it today. If this case stayed with you, drop a comment below. We read everyone. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the like button, and share this with someone who follows true crime. Until next time, stay safe. Stay safe.